Hello and welcome back to Called to Discipleship, where we get to know a Catholic Christian from Central Arkansas who is actively living out their faith. I'm Phillip Renfro. I recently had the privilege of hosting Father Alejandro Puello of St. Anne Parish in North Little Rock. You're going to love his story of being called to discipleship. Go all the way back. Tell us about your childhood, where you were born, and all of that.
Well, as you know, I'm Father Alejandro Puello, and I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic. I was unironically born Independence Day of Dominican Republic, February 27. My parents got divorced when I was 4 years old, and they got an annulment, and I was the only child. Then my mom married another gentleman, my dad married another lady, and I am still my mom's only child, and I am the oldest of six for my dad. So when I was 7, my dad and my siblings and my stepmom, they moved here to the United States. They moved to Miami, and I stayed in the Dominican with my mom. And dad and my siblings and my stepmom, they were practicing the faith, and my mom and I were not. In the Dominican, everybody's Catholic. Everybody's baptized Catholic. It's cultural. Catholicism has been in the Dominican Republic for over 500. Now over 500 years. So it's become more of a cultural. But
or maybe it was because there were 3 other boys that were praying the same thing at the same time.
Could be. But I would be non-practicing for 9 months, then I'd come to the United States, and boom, we would be at Mass, and we would pray the Rosary in the living room, and we would do all these things that you find tedious when you have no faith of your own. But it's my parents doing the best they can to teach us the faith. Well, it was like that until I turned 14. And then when I turned 14, I had fully bought into the work to be a successful professional, leave behind. There are things that are less important, and that included coming and visiting dad and all that. So for a period of 4 years, I stopped coming to visit. And I did all sorts of things like take a course to learn how to do networking, and take a course, Hamilton Jones, how to make friends and influence people type seminar, and all this. My summers would become this kind of training for adulthood. And then when I turned 18, senior year of high school, my mom was having a very difficult time with my stepdad, and it was looking like that was going to end. She got the idea to start a business together, and I'm just, a kid. But I said, whatever, I'll learn whatever. Learning had always come easy to me. And I consume knowledge at an extreme rate. I've always been terminally curious. So I hated school, but I loved learning. I hated the structure of school, but if you could show me that I was learning something, I could put my nose to the, and just concentrate. Well, what ended up happening was she went one day to embroider a gift. She said, well, we could do this. She comes home, tells me about it. I'm like, whatever, we'll do it. So we started a business literally the next week after that. That became my life for like 3 years, for like 2.5 years, where I was just working and going to university, working, going to university, working, going to university. That was it. Nothing else existed. I was, working good on any given week. Anywhere, it could be as low as 60 hours or as many as 100 hours a week, plus taking 21 credits a semester. Without God, supremely depressed, supremely angry with myself, angry with the world, angry with my mom, supremely disillusioned. All the while keeping it secret from my dad, from the people that love me, what ended up happening was then the opportunity to come to the United States kind of popped up. Well, what if I finish my degree in the United States? And the idea was never to stay. The idea was come get a degree, go back to Dominican. At least at least the original intent was that. So call my dad, hey, would you be okay if I move in with you? I don't want to pay room and board at the ASU, at Arkansas State University. Man, and he said yes, but I could hear the pain. Here's your son that you love, that you have tried your best with, that you agonize over leaving with his non-practicing mom in the Dominican. I could hear it, but he said yes, and I came, and that's how I ended up here originally.
So those years that you went to visit him, was he here in Arkansas or was that in Miami?
First Miami, then Marianna, Florida. They kind of kept moving north until they ended up in Arkansas. About a year and a half to 2 years before I came, they had ended up here in Arkansas. Yeah.
Wow. All right.
So then I moved here. And man, was that a big change. Not just a culture shock, but you're going from like living in a town of 3.5 million to living in a town of 20,000. And yeah. Then on top of that, going from, at that point I'd been my own boss. I'd made my own decisions. I left a girlfriend in the Dominican. All these things, right? Where I'd been living my way, how I wanted. And then I move into my dad's house, and they're going to mass every Sunday. They're going to confession regularly. They're praying. They're, my sister's in church. My brothers are altar serving, and dad is thinking about the diaconate. And here I am, the oldest, but also the most immature, the one who's lived with them the least. All at the same time. So there was some friction at the beginning, the readjustment. I still remember a conversation I had with my dad. He kind of gave me like 3 weeks of like settle in. Then I'm gonna kind of give you the rundown. And one day we're driving, and he said, "Okay, here are the rules." He just gave it to me straight. If you don't like him, you can go pay room and board. Otherwise, you gotta live by those. It's my home, and it's and your stepmom, which I refer to as my mom because she is. This is our home. This is how we run our home. This is what makes it work. And you can either live by those rules under our roof, or you can go make up your own. And it's like, okay. So at the beginning, what really started this was I'd always known deep inside of me, somewhere deep inside, I always wanted to do something. I always wanted to be something that was a force of good in the world. Like, I knew that about myself. I was never the kid that fantasized of like playing the villain. I was more like, maybe I'll be, a doctor, or maybe. So I knew deep down inside there was the seed of, I want to do something that is good and that is meaningful.
Well, even those years that you didn't visit your father, you were pursuing things that would help you to grow, right?
Yes, but no.
Okay.
Because has the Lord used all those things? Yes, 100%. But they were in the service and for the aim of something completely contrary to my vocation, right? It was the pursuit of self-aggrandizement, right? I'm gonna put all these tools in my toolkit so that I can, be more successful, make more money, advance faster, all these things. So they weren't really directed to the other, right? Mm-hmm. They were self-service, not other service, which is kind of the essence of the gospel. It's the essence of love,
Right. So.
When I moved in with my dad, one of the things that started happening is very quickly, I started realizing just how truly angry and depressed I was. Because when I moved in, I could hide a lot of that. I could suppress a lot of that under this mountain of pride and kind of self-delusion and kind of like, if I just work hard enough. But then you move in with them and you see their genuine joy. That was what originally got me. It was like their joy angered me. Their joy annoyed me. And that set off alarm bells inside of me. I still remember like it was yesterday, a moment where I realized something has to change. Sitting in the living room, working on homework from the university, trying to do some stuff for the business because I was still sort of partially running the business from here, the business I had left in the Dominican with my mom, and my parents are sitting in the living room watching something. They laughed, and my siblings are in the back, and one of them is in the kitchen, and they hear my parents laugh, and they laughed, and then another one of them laughed, and then I wasn't moved at all. And somewhere in my heart, in my head, in my soul, like there was this moment of like, the joy of the people that love me doesn't move me. Something is dying inside of you. And that scared the you-know-what out of me. That was a moment of, what is going on? I need to do something. I really need to do something. So that's when I first had the conversation with my dad, like, how do I pray? I still remember what he said, because it's changed my life. He said, you talk to God like you talk to me. I had always been able to communicate with my dad. Still to this day, when we talk, it's like we can go from 0 to fully deep in a second.
Wow.
And he said, talk to him like you talk to me. And so I said, okay, if I'm really that desperate, if I'm realizing something inside of me is dying, I need to do something drastic. So I cannot, what is it that they have that I don't have? What is it that they do that I don't do? Okay, they go to Mass, they go to confession, they pray regularly, they're doing all these religious things that I don't want to do because I wanted an answer to my pain that didn't involve taking any responsibility or doing any real effort. Because white knuckling it isn't real effort. Real effort is letting go. Is like submitting to the will of somebody else, to the will of God, right? So I said, okay, if I'm gonna do this, I gotta do it the right way. So I started praying 20 minutes, 30 minutes every night. I'm forcing myself to just go sit down. I would sit or kneel in front of my bed, and I just pray. And at first it was like the first 6 weeks, it was just me complaining and giving God all the flood of negative stuff that was flowing from inside of me. Like just, you've met people like that. The minute they open their mouth, what's going to come out is how terrible their day has been, how awful they feel, how so-and-so has hurt them. Like there's nothing life-giving coming out of them. Just pure emptiness, right? And that was like that for good 6 weeks, until you run out of stuff. It's I've compared it to barfing. Like at some point you're just dry heaving, right? I got to the point of dry heaving in prayer where, okay, nothing more is going to come out. There's nothing left. Okay, so if there's nothing left, what is left? So I started spending time in just being there. I got nothing to say to God. I've already said everything I needed to say. I've already said everything I wanted to say. Okay, I just sit there. And I would sit there for 20 minutes in silence, trying to make God present to me. And at first, I didn't realize anything that was changing. But then, little by little, things started happening. Again, we're almost always the last person to notice. The first thing that started happening was, for example, us doing this would have been impossible for me. I would have needed to stand up, sit down, fidget with my leg. I had so much anxious energy. Anxious all the time, stressed all the time, like someone running out of pure adrenaline 24/7. All of a sudden, I could just be. Okay, I didn't notice. Friends from the university noticed. I would bite my nails off from the anxiety constantly since I was little. For the first time I had nails, and it was my stepmom that noticed, because I was scratching it and she said, "Oh, you can finally do that."
Oh well.
But the way I explain it to people is that even when you think nothing is happening, being in the presence of God is like entering into a nuclear reactor. Just because you don't notice the radiation doesn't mean you're getting cancer. If you're entering the presence of God, just because you don't notice that you're being changed doesn't mean you aren't. Eventually, if you spend enough time there, you're going to notice. Well, that's what was happening. So, little by little, in spending time in prayer and spending time, I started going to confession. I started going to confession maniacally, like 3 times a week. Just prayer, mass, confession, prayer, mass, confession, prayer, mass, confession, prayer, mass, confession, all the time. Because the more I was there, the more the fog lifted. And the way I tell folks is like, your genuine, true self, the one that God envisioned when He made you, right? I knew you before your mother's womb. Okay. That guy is there. It's who you've been meant to be. It's the bare bones of your essence, of your soul. But over time, sin, hurt, pain, you cover it. It just gets covered up by a ton of crap. Just covered up. And then as you get closer to the Lord, as you allow Him to take over, then more and more of it is removed, and your genuine self comes out. And what I started noticing was, like, I went from being supremely shy to being extroverted. Extremely so. I went from being supremely insecure to being, well, kind of prideful almost.
Confident.
Confident, yes. I went from being, there were these changes in me that were happening. I went from thinking, I don't have a sense of humor, I don't find anything funny, levity does not exist in me, to having a sense of humor, being able to laugh about myself, to laugh about the ridiculous, to not take absolutely everything seriously. Well, all that began to happen. And then, the Lord, I got more involved. I started going to adoration, and my parents are seeing this, and they're hating it. They're talking to me about prayer. My dad had taught me to pray the Liturgy of the Hours. So we would drive to Jonesboro, and if I was driving, he would have the Liturgy of the Hours, and he would pray. And if he was driving, I would have the Liturgy of the Hours, and I would pray. So just this was happening, and the Lord just pushed me into this deep well of consolation. I must have had the longest period of consolation anybody has ever experienced. Because it's seriously like good 9 months of just straight up consolation. Every time I'd go to prayer, it's like, oh! And
sounds like you needed that.
and then with that comes it kind of like what's happened in the last two Gospels, the last couple of weekends, two Sundays ago, Sunday ago. They go up the mountain, they see Jesus transfigured, they think they're kind of at the edge of it, and then the cloud rolls over them, and it's like, oh crap. Wait, I was happy to witness this. I was happy to witness it. I didn't want to be part of it, right? And that's when they freak out, right? Until then, they were fine. Mm-hmm. But as soon as the cloud rolls over them, they get scared. Same thing with Moses. He's happy to go investigate that the bush is not burning up. But as soon as he gets close enough and God kind of wraps him in, then he hides his face in fear. Because that's what happens. The Lord gave me all this consolation, and then he brought me to the edge of the next step, which was I started questioning everything. Everything. I started questioning, why did I want to be a businessman? Why did I want to study that? Why did I want to study this? Why did I want to learn that? What was it that I was looking for? And this is a joke I tell my parishioners, but it's a very real thing. The only thing I've ever been an expert in is making bad decisions about myself. That's the only thing I have a mastery in. And at that point, I was beginning to realize that. So the only logical next step was, okay, if I'm an idiot at making decisions about myself, who isn't? The Lord. He made me. He knows what I'm made for. So I started praying one of the most dangerous prayers you can begin praying is, Lord, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? What did you make me for? I started asking that because all of a sudden I was a semester away from graduating from international business, and I'm thinking, why do I even want to be this? Okay. So then one day, I still remember when it happened. I was walking to class at ASU. And I've always had a very kind of visual imagination. I think visually. So if I'm reading a book, I'm not seeing the letters anymore. I'm seeing a movie. I'm walking to class, and this random thought washes over me. And I see myself first person, dressed as a priest in front of an altar in a church full of people. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. I've always been very imaginative. So I thought, that's an interesting thought. I kind of let it go. That was it. But my consolation was gone. Just the Lord yanked it out. He's like, let's see if this is real. Let's see if all this growth that I've let you do, and if all this resting I've let you do, and if all this joy I've let you experience, let's see if this has led anywhere.
So that reminds me of when Jesus was with his disciples on the road and they did not recognize him. But in a way they were consoled, kind of as you were being consoled, because their hearts were ablaze on, from him revealing the scriptures to them. But then when he broke the bread, he was gone. He disappeared. It was kind of like, all right, he pulled away. But now they would have this real test to be able to continue.
Let's see what you do now.
Exactly. Wow, that's incredible.
So at first I didn't notice, because when you're in consolation for that long, like one day where you're not fully in it, like it doesn't feel that strange. After all, I'm praying all the time. Literally was praying all the time. Any free amount of time. This is something I kind of tried to remind myself that I can't quite aspire for the same kind of piety as when I was filled with that supernatural, superabundant consolation. Because when I say I was praying all the time, I was praying literally. Any amount of time I was consciously awake, I would be in conversation interiorly with the Lord. Because you're running not from your own fuel, you're running from His.
That's wonderful. Prayer without ceasing.
Yeah. And so when St. Paul says that, it strikes me that can that be accomplished? Yes, but not in quite the way I first experienced it, because that was a special gift. I have to give thanks for it, but I can't expect it to be the same way again, because everything the Lord does, He does for a reason. It's always intentional, and the intention was to get me to the next step, right? Well, as that thought came, I dismissed it. I went back to prayer. Everything fine, all good and dandy, right? It was just a random thought, but it came back the next day. Okay, I've gotten fixated with thoughts before. Normally, not of such a pure nature, but okay, whatever. Then the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day. And then the next day, more than once. And that's when I started worrying. That's when I started thinking something may be going on.
And you're referring to the vision that you had of being a priest.
Yeah. So I remember I said, went back home, sat down with my dad. We were alone in the house, but I was so scared of it. I waited till we were alone in the house, and we're sitting in the kitchen, in the living room, in the dining room, and he's sitting like in the same space we are. And I kind of lean over and I whisper, because I didn't even want the walls to hear. Dad, something strange has been happening. Just been having random thoughts about priesthood, and what I expected, but it's my dad, and he did exactly what I should have expected him to do. He laughed, and he laughed hard, like belly laugh, like falling off his chair, amounts of laughter. And at first I thought, of course, what dumb thing did I do now? What did I say that was so ridiculous and so hilarious? But we are on the same page when it comes to listening to the Lord on certain things. And everybody has kind of I describe it, everybody has their favorite radio station. We have our favorite radio stations when it comes to listening to God broadcasting. And for me and for him, one of those is irony. When something ironic happens, our antenna is like, is God here? You know, is something happening that God is moving here? So for him, he found it kind of mysteriously perfect that the one of his kids that was least likely, that's the one that the Lord is calling? Of course. Why couldn't it be the ones that altar serve all the time? Or the, you know, like, of course it had to be that one. So he laughed. And I remember what he said to me. He said, well, okay, well, if it's worrying you this much, talk to Father. At the time, Father John Marconi was my pastor up at St. Mary's in Paragould. And I'm like, I think he's the problem. I mean, I've been going to Mass. I'm kind of impressed by the guy. I love how he preaches. Maybe I'm just kind of, you know, maybe I'm a little starstruck. Maybe that's what's happening. That's what I thought. So I was trying to dismiss it. And but I had learned, what do I have a mastery on? Making bad decisions for myself. Okay, so I'm going to listen to that. I know what I want to do, and that seems to be the obviously wrong choice. So I'm going to go and I'm going to do like I've done the last year. I've listened to him, and what has happened? The fog has lifted. What has happened? I've encountered this wonderful God. What has happened? Okay, so I'm gonna go. This is what I did. The part of me that I think the Lord wanted to reveal to me by yanking away the consolation was that there was this resistance in me still. Because the minute that I was faced with the reality of like, man, the cloud washed over me and now I'm part of it, all the things that I had dismissed as useless, all of a sudden I was clinging to them like they were a life raft. But what about my profession? What if I don't finish my degree? And what if I want to go work for a telecommunications company? And blah, 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 blah. All these things that I had dismissed as useless and pointless, all of a sudden I'm like, and so I said, if I go to talk to the priest about this is what he's going to do. He's a priest. He's going to tell me, oh, you thought about priesthood? You got to go to seminary and become a priest. So I made an appointment because, again, I obeyed my dad. But I then spent the entire week prior to the appointment, and I'm not exaggerating, I spent the entire week prior to the appointment psyching myself up to have a fight with the priest. Like, if he says that I need to go to seminary, I'm going to say this. And I'm going to... Okay. Then, I show up to the appointment, having spent a week just psyching myself up. But when I'm there, faced with the reality, I'm like, okay, no, let me try a soft approach first. So I sat down, and this is what I opted for. I told him everything and everything. I told him everything and everything ugly, sinful, prideful that I'd ever done. I thought, if I tell him how bad I am, he will say, surely, if this dude is mentioning priesthood, this is not for him. Surely not. So then, at the end, after I had told him everything that I'd ever done or thought of doing, then I said, I've been thinking about priesthood. And I fully expected him to go, well, that means you got to be a priest. And I'm ready to pounce. I spent a week psyching myself up for this. So what happens? He says, well, if it worries you this much, if it's coming from you or coming from God, why don't you ask God? He didn't try to sell me priesthood. He tried to sell me discernment. And that was that he burst my, my bubble, and it's like all that pent up anticipation just, okay, dang it. Okay, so I went home, and I prayed the best and stupidest prayer I've ever prayed in my life. Went home, knelt down in front of my bed, and this is almost verbatim what I prayed. Lord, I need a for sure, no nonsense, direct answer whether these thoughts of priesthood are coming from you or from me. Because if they are coming from me, I need you to put them out of my mind so that I can concentrate on what I need to do and the things I need to accomplish. That was what I prayed. Period. I thought I knew what the answer was. I go the next day to pick up my dad at work. And he's working still at St. Bernard's Hospital in Jonesboro. And at the time, there was a Benedictine priest there as a chaplain, Father Quentin Cathal. I think he's still alive. He's from Conception Abbey in Missouri. And I think I'd exchanged maybe 5 words with the guy. I'm walking in a hallway. Someone taps me on my shoulder. I turn around. This is the very next day after praying. I turn around. He says, "Hello, Alejandro. Have you ever thought about going to seminary and becoming a priest?" I was so angry. I looked up, and I'm like, really? Kind of look at Father, I'm like, no, not really. Smile. And sure enough, kind of tried to dismiss it. I go home that day, and I go and I pray the same prayer. But this time I prayed angry. I'm like, Lord, I need a for sure, no nonsense, direct answer. If this is you or me, and nice try today. And boom, the next day I go back to pick up my dad at work. And we'd become friends with the Holy Angels Convent owns St. Bernard's Hospital. So the nuns do pastoral work there. And I had become close with one of the nuns who's now enjoying the Lord's glory, Sister Cordis Kim. And we had talked about 1,000 things. We had never talked about vocation. She was this tiny Korean nun. I find her in the hallway, we get to talking, and mid-conversation, she just stops. She stops walking, looks at me, because she was like this tall, and she says, "Alejandro, you go to seminary, become good priest." And then just keeps walking, and I'm like, really? Really? Like, I thought we had this conversation, Lord. Like, you knew. So I go back and pray again. And the next day, someone else asked. And then the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day. And it came in all sorts of different ways.
So you're up to a week by this point.
let me put it this way. I've given some biblical figures a run for their money in stubbornness. Every day, God would send a sign. And my favorite one was day 17. Yes, 17. I went 3 weeks, 21 days before I gave up. Day 17, I sit in my car in the morning, and this is what I said. Today, I'm going to avoid anything and everything Catholic. There could not possibly be anyone who decides to spontaneously pray about vocations. There cannot be someone who's going to spontaneously decide to ask me if I've thought about being a priest. There can't possibly be anyone, right? If I actively avoid them, then you don't win. I win. turn on the car, and the radio station in which the car is on is a Protestant radio station, because I had taken to listening to Christian radio. And the first thing I hear is, today Pastor so-and-so is going to be preaching about doing what God is calling you to do. I turn off the radio, I shut down the car, I'm like, ah!
That's incredible.
Oh yeah, but this is the thing that I tell folks. Does it make for a good story? Of course it does. Of course it does, and it's mine. But does it make for a truly good disciple? Because that's the thing. Like the vocation stories that really impress me are the ones where the guy just had the humility and courage to give in to the Lord. Where the Lord didn't have to strong arm him. He didn't have to pursue him for 21 days. He didn't have to convince him, right? And much to my shame, to convince me after 9 freaking months of consolation, like how more could he have prepared me to say yes, right? But my pride and my stubbornness were epic. They still are in many ways. But finally, after that, then we went to the next step, which was I was still resisting, but I couldn't deny that God was calling. So what do you do then? I entered the next step of my resistance, which was, you can't make me do it. I went to prayer, and this is what I said to God. I still remember it because it's one of the dumbest prayers I've ever prayed, and I highly recommend praying it. Lord, you know that I don't want to be a priest. You know that I know that this is not for me. And the only way this is going to work is if you make me want what you want. But I didn't say it as a petition. I said it as an accusation. Right? The only way you're going to make me want to be a priest is if you make me want it. Right? Mm-hmm. Well, I go to bed, wake up the next day, I feel ill. You know how you feel when you know you're getting sick, but you're not yet sick? There's this kind of sense of impending doom, right? Okay. Go to prayer, go to mass, do what I have to do, right? Come back the next day, same feeling. 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 After like 4 or 5 days of not getting sick, but not getting rid of the feeling, a light bulb turned on, and I thought, and I realized, of all the prayers I have prayed, that was the one you decided to answer? Of all the prayers I've ever prayed, that was the one you answered? And so I realized, I think there was a part of me that realized, it's game over. Now he's just waiting me out, right? But have I mentioned that I'm stubborn? So this is what happened. For the next 6 months, not only did I not contact the vocations office at all, I never made a single phone call to the diocese. Ever. You know who did? My stepmom. When she realized what was going on, she was at a retreat, a Crucier retreat, and Monsignor Friend was the retreat director, and she went up to him and said, "My son is discerning priesthood. You need to talk to him." And I get this random phone call one day from a number I don't know. "Hi, Alejandro, this is Monsignor Scott Friend. I'm the vocations director of the Diocese of Little Rock. Your mom gave me your number." I'm like, "Which one of them?" So I know who to kill. And But I resisted. I tried everything. At one point, I decided that the only way I could beat God at His own game was I'm going to stop praying. And I remember what happened still, because it's one of the most shocking, kind of scary experiences of my life. I decided that instead of going to prayer like I was normally doing, I wouldn't pray that day. So I got up, went to school, came back, everything. And somewhere around late afternoon, I started feeling that old blanket of sadness and anxiety and depression just like looming over me. And I thought, no, I can't do that. I mean, I can resist him, but I sure as I can't afford to live without him.
Wow.
So I said, okay, that's not going to work. So I still got to pray. I still got to spend time with him. I don't want to do what he wants me to do, but I can't afford not to be with him. So I kept praying. Until eventually, after my mom gave Monsignor my phone number, we decided, okay, we'll meet once a month. So I started meeting with Monsignor once a month. The day before our third meeting, I'd been resisting for so long that I was physically, emotionally, spiritually, in every possible way that you could feel tired, I felt exhausted. Because there's only one way this is going to go. He's the Almighty. I'm not. I can pretend. So that day I woke up and I was exhausted. It was one of those days where you feel so exhausted that you cannot even muster the energy to be cordial to people. It's like the best I could manage was, I hope a truck doesn't hit you today. You know?
Which is something that we should pray every day, right?
But it's not like have a good day. It's just one of those days where you're one step below hating everything. And I go to class, I come back, and I've been wrestling with the Lord about this for so long. Finally, I go to the shower, and as I'm taking a shower, I have a breakdown or a breakthrough, and something in me just broke, and I started crying like a baby. My dad and my stepmom are in the hallway outside of the bathroom. They're hearing this. She's like, he finally broke. So they got their ear against the door, right? And this is what they're hearing. They're hearing me cry like an absolute maniac. Under the shower, half rinsed. And I still remember, again, those moments they're etched in my heart and in my head. I remember what I prayed. It was a prayer. Yes, it was yelling, but it was a prayer. Okay, I give up. You win. I'm going to go tomorrow, and I'm going to tell my senior friend, and I'm going to go, and I'm going to sign the stupid papers. And the only way I can describe it is if the universe has a pause button, God hit it. When I said, I give up, you win, everything faded away. And I mean everything. It was literally like the world paused. Like the universe stopped moving. And I still get emotional remembering it. Because I've never felt such tangible peace. I couldn't hear the water. I couldn't feel the water of the shower. Nothing. It was like, poof, perfect peace. It was so tangible. It was like a ton of bricks just hit me. And I remember realizing there's no turning back. He won. And in a moment, to give you a glimpse into my conversations with the Lord, into my inner life with God, even in that moment, the next thought was this. Well, heck, if I knew giving up would have felt like this, I would have given up months ago. That was the very next thought I had.
So would you call that moment of universe pausing peace consolation again? Is that after having gone so long without it, was that a moment of consolation?
No, I think I wouldn't call it consolation. I would call it the Lord gave me a glimpse into full communion. It was a perfect moment. Is truly a perfect moment. A moment where my mind, my soul, my body, my heart were in perfect harmony with what God wants, what God wills, what God feels, what God desires, and what God wants for me. Where everything is in the same track, and you're of one mind with the Lord and of one heart with the Lord. I've only experienced that twice. That time, and then in my first year of priesthood, after hearing confessions, in a different way. In this, it was peace. In the other was a realization of I'm not loving them with my heart. I'm loving them with His, and it hurts, and it's so beautiful and perfect. It's but yeah, that moment. So I got out. And again, irony. It's just one of those stations that I have favorited in the radio of my soul to hear God, and God always will have the last word. So this is what happened. So I'm 100% convinced, okay, I'm going. From that moment on, I never again questioned whether I was being called to priesthood. I only questioned how I was going to get there. Which I don't think is a common kind of vocation story. I think most guys kind of go to seminary to figure out if they're being called. I didn't go to figure out if I was being called. I think when I went, I knew I was being called because I'd already resisted it for so long. But I go to my third appointment with a Monsignor friend, and I walk in the door, and he says, "Hello, Alejandro. So, are you coming or not?" And I could feel the Lord smiling at me, going, "Told you." And it was kind of this perfect capping of that of my discernment at that moment. It didn't mean I didn't struggle in seminary and all those things. Like, yes, there's ups and downs, but that I've gone from believing to knowing, right? I knew at that point. So, I mean, you never really quite moved to fully knowing, but I was pretty darn sure at that point, like, okay, this is what the Lord wants, this is what He made me for, and I kind of have to get with the program now, because, again, I only have a master's degree in making bad decisions for myself. So, yeah. Wow. That's my story. Then 6 years of seminary, and now this May 10 years of priesthood.
Wow. Well, congratulations in advance.
Thank you.
That's 10 years. That's an accomplishment. Your story is incredible. I really appreciate it. I don't really know what else to ask you unless you have anything. I mean, that's incredible. Yeah, I think that we could get into more specifics about your ministry here. Maybe we should save those for another time.
Perhaps for another time.
Yeah. Golly, if if other priests and the lay faithful, if we could develop those habits of prayer and everything, we could really change the world.
Prayer, man, it's like breathing. It really is like learning to breathe. Until you've taken a real first breath, you don't know what you're missing out. So it's like someone who's starving. They don't know what the richness of flavor of food until they've had that first bite. And they've nibbled at stuff, right, to survive. But once you go from survival to growing and thriving, it's like, I don't know what I would do without prayer. And that doesn't mean I don't struggle with it, and it doesn't mean I haven't had dry periods and periods of consolation and periods of desolation. But like, I honestly do not know what I would do without prayer. I remember I preached 2 weeks ago for the Transfiguration. The gospel was the Transfiguration. When you preach, you're really preaching to yourself most of the time. And I was preaching about that, not fearing the Lord drawing you in, but rather allowing your motive to begin following Him to be purified. Because what got you there at the beginning doesn't need to be pure. He doesn't care that it wasn't pure. He cares that you are the present, right? What got me to start praying was I just didn't want to be I don't want to be depressed, right? That's not a pure motivation to follow God, but He'll take it, right? He doesn't care what brought you to the door. He only cares that you stay close to Him, right? Peter, James, John, they all followed. Not originally because, I want to love this guy. No, they had their own motivations. They thought he was going to do different things, right? But the goal really is, I want to get to a spot where I can say, I follow the Lord because I love Him. The only motivation I need is that I genuinely desire union with Him and love Him, right? Right now, I'm at the I don't know what I would do without Him stage. But that's not quite pure, right? That's not quite really pure. That's still kind of from the angle of I don't know what I would be without Him, right? It's not, I love Him so purely and perfectly. But the goal is getting there. But that doesn't happen without really getting close and and letting yourself be drawn in and have the cloud wash over you and getting close to the burning bush and taking your shoes off and daring to see God face to face. That kind of scary intimacy, to put it kind of how I put it today for folks is that moment where you realize He is unchanging and I am not, and in the face of the unchanging, the one who's changeable will change, will be transformed. It's like, well, maybe I don't want to be transformed. Maybe I kind of like my sins the way they are and my bad habits the way they are, and I'm okay being good, okay, but not quite a saint, right? It's that. So the whole goal is you don't leave prayer. You don't stop following the Lord. Why? Because the more you do, the more He will purify the reason that you are following Him. Until you get to, I follow Him because I love Him. That's the goal, right?
Wow. Yeah. Truly. Well, thank you, Father.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so much. If you would, give us a blessing.
Sure. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
May Almighty God, who loves you, who knows you, who calls you, bless you, your ministry, and the people whose lives you touch. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Go in peace, brother.
Thank you. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God for Father Puello and for bringing him kicking and screaming into the Catholic priesthood. It's a great reminder that we never experience our truest joy until we surrender ourselves to God's will, because it's in that where we find our true selves, who we were made to be. If you enjoyed this episode and wish to see others like it, please click that like button and please also subscribe to our channel. And if the idea of having a local Catholic radio station here in Central Arkansas excites you, go to our website, arcofheavenmedia.org, to donate and get involved. Thank you to the generous donors of our 40K and 40 Days campaign. Honestly, we're a miracle or two away from reaching that goal by the end of this Lent, so please prayerfully consider whether the Lord is calling you to support our mission of bringing Catholic radio to the Little Rock area. Again, that's arcofheavenmedia.org. Thank you. May God richly bless you, and now, be a disciple.